What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Wise Weekly. We are the two guys from Wise, and I'm Mark Airy.
And I am Chad Miller.
We have a couple of very special guests this today. We're doing this for the second time because the first one, Chad forgot to record us.
Technical issues.
But we have the Tanners with us, Rusty and Mickey. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
How are y'all?
Good.
Good.
Good. We've got a pretty hot topic to discuss today. As we just discussed when we started, this conversation could go a lot of different directions, but we're going to try and focus on one of the main issues, and that's the transgenderism ideology. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, you two are very well versed, understanding where it came from and how we got to this point.
Now, with that as an intro, so Rusty, I've got now, Mickey. I had to trim this down a little bit.
Absolutely.
Y'all's resumes are way too beefy. So, retired United States Air Force Pararescue Chief Master Sergeant. 24 years, you rescue combat pilots shot down behind enemy lines in all the terrains and locations. Trained in emergency medicine, survival and evasion, scuba diving, parachuting, mountain climbing, hand-to-hand combat, and weapons. That's why I never wanted to mess with you. Yeah, I never wanted to mess with Russ. Aside from him being a beautiful, nice person.
Man.
The last 10 years, though, you worked with the Special Operations Anti-Terrorist Unit supporting SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force. Since retiring, you obtained your master's in Physician's Assistant Studies, and you are a PA in family medicine at
Bridgeport Family Clinic.
Bridgeport Family Clinic. Thank you for being here, sir. Very impressed.
Very impressed.
Very impressed. And Mickey, your lovely wife, you are born Scottish or British? British in the Philippines, and grew up during the Imelda Marcos era, correct?
Ferdinand Marcos.
But Imelda was she was the one with the shoes, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Lived through martial law, military coup, a collapsing economy, the loss of freedoms, and the people power revolution. You finally made it to North America in '93 and became a U.S. citizen in 2011.
Right.
Wow.
And that was not why y'all got married, was to make her a legal citizen, right?
May or may not have been, but that's neither here nor there.
We'll leave that off. I'll edit that out.
That's another story.
Yeah. But I think that both of those, with both of your backgrounds, that really ties it. Because it's like, well, why do we care about the transgender issue? So why do you care about the transgender issue?
Well, primarily for me, it's about the freedoms that I fought for to give the American people. And what we've got is a generation that's going to be lost. They're on their way to being lost now because they have lost their identity and who they are. And this transgender is just another point of trying to give somebody an identity. Mm. And it's a false identity. It's a lie. It's flat out lying to our children. Yeah. And we're watching it happen while we sit back.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Adults have failed our children in the largest way, and they're paying the price for it, unfortunately, and we're going to pay the price also. So.
Yeah, and it really does seem like it was a fast track from Bruce Jenner, because that's really where it escalated. Now, we've seen it coming for a little bit.
Here in America, anyways.
Correct, here in America. And that's a good point, actually, because this has been going on in Western Europe. What are they, 5-7 years ahead of us?
In Europe?
Yeah,
probably.
And specifically, I think, with the children, right?
But you got to realize this has been going on for much, much longer than we realize. It's just simply now hit the major headlines. It's made our magazine covers. It's made the news, and it's become a celebratory issue now. When Bruce Jenner got on, that was where it started really hitting the magazines and made a big deal and made a big splash. The whole idea has been around for a long time. We've had a lot of clandestine transgender clinics over the years and decades. They've been, like I say, we're behind what they've been doing over in Sweden, Denmark, Britain, Finland. A lot of those things have been going on over there already.
For how long?
It's decades and decades.
Yeah.
Specifically, there's a Johns Hopkins transgender unit that was in play back in 1965, all the way to 1970.
We touched on this last time. I'd like you to go into detail about that.
All right. Well, this is all set up. And the idea was that they saw these people that were having these problems, and they were having an issue with being able to get into get into society, into life. and being uncomfortable. They had a multitude of other comorbidities, which are psychological diagnoses. And so this was looked at as the fix for their psychological issues. Because they were so uncomfortable in the body they were in, they were going to do something to transition them to the other gender.
Right. So the solutions are one of two. Either get the mind in line with the body or get the body in line with the mind.
Yeah, good point.
Right? That's
Correct.
essentially.
And so they chose to get the body to follow the mind. And what they did after all these times of doing follow-up investigations, when they would go back to these people, now this was very extensive. They were doing enough to train them how to act the other gender, how to dress, giving them acting lessons, surgeries, cosmetics, everything.
The whole 9 yards.
The whole 9 yards. And then translocating them and helping them get into society with this new gender. What they found out as they went to interview them years later, initially they were saying, yeah, we're happy, this is good. But this is what he found out. This was Dr. McHugh. McHugh was the chief of psychiatry of Johns Hopkins at the time. And what they did is they found out that all of their psychological issues persisted. Not got better, not decreased, but persisted. And even though, so there were a lot of different concepts that people don't really look at, but some of this was about cross-dressing. Some of this was about going with the same sex and being able to look at it as if you're the opposite sex.
Right.
But all of the issues that went with it, all of the psychological issues persisted. So what his statement was, it looks like we have decided to collaborate with an emotional distressed diagnosis. We are collaborating with the psychological condition instead of addressing the psychological condition.
Well, and the big thing is the suicide issue.
Right.
And that's why parents get concerned about their kids, because they're told that if you don't affirm this, then they're going to commit suicide.
So go a little deeper into that. We touched on that last time. I guess that's how they get the parents to go along with it. Is
Right.
Once that kid says I'm suicidal,
And the schools and all the institutions.
Right.
Guilt.
they guilt trip them into going along with it, and essentially
You want a dead son or a live daughter?
correct.
Right.
But they've proven that suicide is 20 times higher
Among those
among
who.
those that have actually transitioned. So it doesn't change that. It makes it even worse.
The reason this is such a the reason we wanted to cover this topic is for the obvious. Chad especially has been on about trying to get some of our local schools to put policy in place. A real simple policy. It's just that we're gonna identify with the gender that you were born as. It's on your birth certificate. It's real simple.
Yeah, gender is determined by biological
Biological
reality.
sex, right.
That's
Right.
it.
And to people listening, you might not understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe there's 10 or 9 freshmen in Decatur that identifies trans or.
Well, our producer, my son Christian Miller over there, yes, he knows this is prevalent.
Yeah.
Prevalent in Decatur ISD. And by the way, it's not just Decatur.
Sure.
It's not as though this is just Decatur
No,
or it's just the bigger schools. I mean, in Chico, in Slidell, because of these phones and the social media access that we have, that's essentially, and that's
It's more than that, though.
Oh, it is more than
You're
that.
right. It's more than that. It's embedded into the education that if you're having these feelings, well, this is a solution. And this is going to give your identity. It's more than just the phone and the social media. It's ingrained in every part of society right now.
Correct. And
That's why we're sounding the alarm.
the whole idea is they don't have an identity.
Yes.
They are lost. So they are lost of their identity, who they were made and designed to be as a human being. Without that identity, they're hungry for an identity. And so you've got a flood of information and media platforms. It doesn't matter whether you're on Instagram, TikTok, it doesn't matter. All of these issues, Facebook, if you're looking at watching television, you're seeing people come out and changing their identity, and then they are picked up, they are celebrated.
Sure.
We've got colleges that have month-long Pride days, weeks,
Hell,
months.
we've got month-long Pride Days in
Yes.
America every year.
We've got pride
Austin.
parades. We've got TV. We've got people are being celebrated, and they're taking a child who's confused and going through a very hard time. And they're telling them this, if you'll just do this, everything will be all right.
Right.
If you'll just do this, we're going to love you. If you'll just do this, you're going to have an identity. You're going to know who you are, your purpose in life, and you're going to be all right.
And that's one of those things. You talked about the comorbidities earlier, and that's one thing that's really important to point out is that what are the, like, and Mickey, you and I have really gone through this a lot. What are some of the alarming trends that we're seeing now, like percentages, where we realize this is not something that's natural. This is a true.
Random.
Talk about the clusters.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've got the social media influencers that are telling these girls that they'll be
Paid
celebrated.
influencers
Oh
at
yeah,
that.
paid
Yeah.
influencers.
That's a good
And
point.
so all these girls, and I think you brought up the last time that they want to. What was the word that you used? These girls, they want to be like somebody else.
Yes, it's just called. There's two different categories in the transgender diagnosis. Is those that start out from childhood are different.
Truly gender identity disorder, right? Or what they're calling gender dysphoria
Yes,
now.
that's where the dysphoria starts at childhood.
And it was
early childhood.
historically predominantly in boys.
Right.
Right.
And so the issues that come up with them is that they are different. If somebody has anxiety or if somebody has autism or they have depression, they're different.
Right.
They're different. But what they're saying is they're different because they don't have the right gender. Mm-hmm. And that's becoming what's fed to them, and they take that on. If we used to have a boy that was play with things that were more feminine, we called him a sissy. Or a girl would be a tomboy.
Right.
And we basically didn't address that as a gender issue and allowed them to grow out of it.
Correct.
And here's the thing about
Most of the time they would.
yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about transgender is there's two different categories. So there's that, and then there's what is called rapid onset gender dysphoria.
And by the way, and that is this new thing that's come
the
up.
new thing that's happening in schools.
Right,
And
so-
that's what was the point. I'm sorry, he made the last time.
Yes.
Was where the girls almost like put their personality on somebody else.
They will suspend reality in order to
Suspend
get into their
reality.
friend's
There you
emotional state.
There you go.
Because they're empaths, because women are
They're
naturally
empath-
more
yes, and you
empathetic.
find
Right.
that you can find that they can take on depression, they can take on the anxiety of a friend because they get so close to them. Mm-hmm. It's about being able to have an emotional attachment to a friend. And that's where these levels start to elevate. That's when you start to find groups of girls who've decided they're transgender.
Because they're like you said, they're usually on the spectrum of some kind, right? They're autistic too, and maybe not fully autistic,
Right.
but maybe but they're on the spectrum. And like you mentioned, depression, anxiety, they've got mental issues that they're dealing with. And in their sadness, they're looking for answers. What's wrong with me? Then they find these other kids. And again, that's where the social media comes in, because they're telling them all this stuff that's wrong, that you think is wrong with you. That's not what's wrong with you.
This is your answer.
This is your
I
answer.
actually know a young girl who went through high school, was a real popular girl, went through high school, normal as can be, and then went to college, and I think a few years later, all of a sudden now she's bisexual or something. And clearly it's a case of, from what little I can see and tell, the girl's broken. For whatever reason, I don't believe she has any major mental issues. She's just broken and insecure, and it's an outlet, a way for her to try and find who she is.
She is.
So I think a lot of the kids that start experimenting with it, that's just it. They're not. They're just broken. They're a little damaged.
They're looking for identity. They're looking to belong.
Acceptance.
That's
what it's
anytime
all
you
is.
see kids that are runaways from families that are dysfunctional. They're looking they get into a gang. Why'd you get into the gang? They're looking to belong.
That's it.
That's where they get their identity.
That's right.
And this is just nothing more than a internet gang. Mm-hmm. Influencers basically telling we're going to love bomb you, and hey, this is not against the law. It's celebrated.
And this is the big difference, is that if you're in a gang, you have pop culture that could kind of reinforce that. But all in all, hey, you're a criminal, you'll go to prison. You've got the full force of the federal government, the media, all the corporations now. Everybody is pushing this as like, yes, you
But
need
the
to be
bigger
in that.
problem with the difference between the kids turn into gangs or this is permanent. You start taking the drugs,
And that's what I was getting to.
have the mastectomy,
That's
you have
right.
the surgeries.
Right.
Yeah, you can get out of the gang, but you can't get out of this one after it's all over.
Right.
I watched. I started following this. It's a young girl. She's 19. She started transitioning at 15. Came across her on Twitter. 19 years old now, completely bald, has been on hormones for all these years.
Yeah. She's another one. Chloe's another one.
Yeah.
And
that
this
one is
poor-
sad.
It's the saddest
sad.
thing to listen to this young girl talk about how her doctors and her parents, even still to this day, are trying to talk her out of
Detransition.
Yeah.
There's really no hope for her. It leaves this human being that's mangled. Used to be a very cute young girl, but will never ever be able to achieve anything like that again. And they're just stuck in between.
No, because
There's no now think of and there's no life for this person to live besides to share the story and try and help others. Luckily, I believe from what I can tell on Twitter, she's starting to do just that. But it's the saddest thing I've ever witnessed.
she'll never have children. And if by miracle she is, she'll definitely never breastfeed her children. Her voice will always be multiple octaves lower.
Oh, yeah.
These things are irreversible. The hair loss,
Yeah.
the facial hair, all of that stuff. And that's why Abigail Schreier wrote a book, Irreversible Damage, where she really goes into this. And that's the point that we're getting to, is that we've got Abigail Schreier, we've got Deborah Soule, who is
She writes about the RGOD,
yes,
rapid onset gender dysphoria.
correct. And she's the one who identified both of these women. Neither of them are Christians. Neither of them are right wing. Deborah Soule is an actual atheist, but she is following the science on this. And that's what Abigail Schreier did, is they follow the science and they look at what's actually happening and realize that these things are irreversible. And that's why we have been sounding the alarm on this, because it's one thing to pollute a kid's mind. That's bad enough, right? To tell that kid to get in that gang and
But to ruin them
permanently. To be legal in the state of Texas for a doctor to prescribe large amounts of testosterone and puberty blockers to young girls, or estrogen to boys.
Well, and they're selling them this lie that
It'll fix you.
and there's no harm. It's reversible. You can stop at any time. And
No, it's not.
it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
I don't know how they get away with
And once
that.
they start those hormone changes,
It's permanent.
I think it's 100% or 98% go
Those
into
that
the,
do puberty blocking, 98% will go into cross-sex hormones.
hormones.
Correct.
And a large percent of those would actually have the surgeries done.
Right.
And this is how you need to look at it. Greater than 94% if you leave them alone and let them go through puberty will normalize.
Except
And
they're
live a happy, normal, healthy, productive life.
right.
And recognizing that their body is correct.
Correct.
Not a mistake.
The thing that makes me so mad about this and why we're having this podcast and I want to speak out is this is all in the name of money.
Huge.
Not
Huge.
to the parents, but to the doctors and the ones doing the surgeries. It's a $5 billion a year industry already right now. And they just see this as an avenue to make more money. It's no more than that for these doctors. We know it's a way to break society down. But to the
Right. That's true. That's a good point.
to the parents out there who may have a kid struggling with this, God bless you. Don't give in. Don't give in.
Yeah, because and I think that the dollar amount, I've seen the figures, is about $1.2 to $1.4 million that each person who goes through this will net to the pharmaceutical companies for the rest of their life.
Yeah, because they're on the drugs for forever.
You have to.
You have to be.
You have to
But
stay
I think
on these
that's
drugs
why
for
we've
forever.
tried to get this into the schools so much. It's
Correct.
Because we have to educate these parents that
Yes.
what they're being told isn't the truth.
Well, and the thing is too is that people
You
will
would think
think,
they would have to know, though. That's what bothers me. You would think these parents would have to know.
but as long as it's not my kid, if it's not my kid, then whatever.
Well,
and
I
that's
care
the
about
problem.
other people's
That's
kids.
the point.
I mean-
That's what I don't understand about this.
But they're told the lie that if you
And they
don't,
have the microphone.
And
Yeah, that's true.
if you don't take care of my child, they're going to commit suicide.
Yeah, true.
We have to affirm them in this, and it's only now that these detransitioners are finally starting to talk, and they're starting to sue, and they're suing in the UK, and they're suing now here in the United States.
And that Chloe Cole, she was the first one to actually
Right.
file. And I can't believe it's taken that long for one person to file a lawsuit. And what they're suing, this is what I've tried to get across to the schools, is that when this reckoning comes, and Lord willing, it's going to, and I don't know how it can,
will.
they're going to come after everybody, as they should.
Yes.
They're going to go after first their doctors. They
Oh, your school, you went along with blah, blah, blah.
Their parents.
Yeah, Miss
Their
Jones.
parents
Miss
were
Jones, my
not there.
counselor at Decatur ISD,
Yeah.
my math teacher at Boyd ISD, whatever. All of this, everyone is going to be on the hook for this
Yeah.
because this girl is now permanently damaged, double mastectomy, you name it, all the biological damage that happens that can't be undone, and someone's going to pay for that. And there are going to be judges that are going to rule, because I think it's happening already.
Okay, they're changing all the way that they deal with all this in Europe, in Sweden, in Finland, in the UK. The HHS in the UK has changed their whole policy towards this.
See,
Their medical.
and that's what we've got. And by the way, and that's a good point too, is that what we're mainly talking about here, I mean, yes, we understand that if you're an adult and you go through with this, that the stats are not on your side. It's, you know, and we have nothing but compassion for all of them.
I mean, adults, do what you want.
Right. But we still think that it's not going to be good for you.
Sure,
but at the end of the day, you're an adult.
Yeah.
You're an adult. But the children,
Leave the children alone, man.
I mean, they've crossed the line, and I'm just keep hoping that this is going to be the line that people finally wake up and say, okay, this is not a left issue. This is not a right issue. It's not Democrat, Republican. It's right and it's wrong. And this is objectively wrong.
You better believe COVID amplified this exponentially. You better believe that locking kids down, taking them away from school,
That's right.
putting them in front of the computer and TV for 2 years, amplified this
That's a good point.
in a
Isolation,
huge way.
loss of
Isolation.
identity.
Because now the kids who are depressed, now what happens?
Yeah, elevated. I want to tell you, there's another story about a man that was in Canada, and he was recognized as a world-class transgender specialist in psychology and psychiatry. He was running a clinic, and he was expected to go big places. And one day he got to the point where he kept looking over the data and recognized that there were some children that were being led into this, that it wasn't working out after they'd done it. And so he spoke up and said that we need to reconsider doing this to the children. It's okay for the adults.
Right.
The people that were supporting him before turned on him like attack.
Mm-hmm.
They attacked him. They made accusations against him. They filed complaints. They ended up actually assaulting his personal integrity and professional integrity, accused him of sexually molesting some of his patients. Wow. They said he needed to be disbarred from the medical profession.
When was this?
It was, his name is Kenneth Zucker.
Okay. This is the teens of this year, of this century?
I think it wasn't that long ago.
Okay.
He's still around, and they've ended up finally disbarring him from the medical system, shut down his clinic, and ended up in a far-reaching movement to justify what they did. They ended up getting exposed. They found out that all of the claims against him of sexually molesting kids were false accusations. All of the National Health System in Canada did was done wrong, and all of it had to be reversed. But his reputation was over
Sure,
and
it's
done.
too late.
It's done.
Too late.
And you told me a story one time, and I thought it was actually very interesting, which is how, because if you follow the trail, like it used to be called gender identity disorder, right? And then the APA reclassified it so that it is no longer. That's why I don't use the term gender dysphoria. I use the term gender identity disorder because that's truly what it is.
Yeah, they took it out because they didn't want it. And when the activists were basically had their way with getting it changed from a disorder to a dysphoria, some of the people on the panel said, you last year or the years before, you came and had us remove homosexuality as a disorder or a dysfunction or a dysphagia. You just had it removed.
Completely.
Why didn't you have gender disorder removed instead of just change the name? He said, well, it's very simple. You need a code in the medical profession in order to fund the transitioning. So it has to remain as a diagnosis so you can have a code so it'll be paid for. And then it
Follow
goes,
the money.
follow the money. It's all about the legality of the diagnosis code, which authorizes the training of other people to treat this, and then it makes it legal to do it, and it's like a domino effect all the way down. Follow the money.
So the other side of this coin, besides from the money, I believe, and I think everybody sitting at this table believes, there's another reason that this is being pushed on society. It's to break people down. It's to weaken society. It's to take strong men and strong minds away, free thinkers away. And what better way to do it than go after the kids and weaken and soften the kids
and destroy the family, right?
And destroy the family
Any way you can, any
Yes.
way you can. And
Yes.
and if you can't go after the natural function between man and woman, let's just go even further and just say, what is a man? What is a woman? It's all a spectrum, right?
All of this would lead one to believe, number one, what's going on across the world. It's not just happening in America or in Europe. It's happening across the world. In sync. It's coordinated. Mm-hmm. And so you have to start asking, well, what is going on and why? What's the purpose of weakening society and doing this to people? Me personally, I believe it all goes back to globalism.
Well, it does.
World government, and what better way to gain control over all the countries than something along these lines? Mm-hmm. And as more time has gone on, especially since COVID, I think it's become more evident that's the path we're headed down.
Well, and part of the sadness of it too is that we've lost so much trust. You as a PA, your industry now. My wife is a registered nurse, right? The medical industry it's in shambles. The academic community in shambles, but as far as the average person goes, because we can't trust these institutions anymore.
Right.
They're completely corrupted. And that's what is sad about this is that, there's multiple things that are sad, but that's one of the things that it just is, that's not good for society when we have lost trust in these institutions. And I think the medical community was probably the last domino to fall.
Yeah.
We never trusted politicians, right? We never trusted
But Chad, don't you think it's sad, though, that it's a minority that's causing this problem?
it fits though.
That
It always is.
We don't trust our schools anymore, and it's just a minority of people that are causing the problem.
Right.
And with an agenda to go after our kids.
Well, they're
and
very
destroy
vocal,
our
though.
Family.
I can't remember who I was listening to speak a couple years ago, 6 months after COVID happened. They were talking about it's the most bizarre thing ever. There's a small group, under 100 people, very powerful people across the world, who are pulling all the strings on COVID. We were being controlled. The entire universe, the entire world was being controlled by less than 100 powerful, wealthy people. And it always is just a small minority pulling the strings, and that's what people need to understand. The power lies in the people collectively. And until we learn that, we'll continue to be beaten down on throughout society, your community, your state, whatever.
Well, and I think that ultimately, because if we talk about the coordination as to how this works, and this is where you can have the atheist professor who can say all this, but at the end of the day, this is a very spiritual battle that is going on. Ultimately, that's what it is.
You better believe it.
This is and that's why destroy the family, right? And the funny thing is that it's not even like marriage between a man and a woman. That's not this Judeo-Christian institution, although it is. But all cultures, all civilizations have had this. That's embedded in who we are as human beings.
That's right.
And again,
that's natural.
And the science and the stats bear it out.
Yeah.
A mother and father married, raise their child in that home. That child has the best chance of success by any metric that you can measure.
How did they destroy black families?
Oh.
Historically, black families used to have a higher rate of the parents staying together over divorce than whites.
Attack the husband.
Family planning.
How did they destroy
That's what they call it,
the
family
African Americans?
Mm-hmm.
Welfare. They came in, started handing out welfare, dumped crack cocaine in the neighborhoods, and now the percentage of black families that stay together is just
and we know
incredibly low.
Planned Parenthood.
Correct.
Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, and we know this as men that if I am working my tail off, now we're poor because I'm working and I'm out in the fields, but that little hovel that I've got, now poverty brings its struggles, it does,
Sure.
but I know that I paid for that.
You
I
bet.
worked for that.
You bet.
And there's a value, right? I have self-worth now.
Yes.
But then they say, well, hey, look, your income level, you're right above where you need to be. But if your income was lower, you get this apartment. you get this refrigerator that's full of food that we're paying for.
Incentivized.
You're incentivized
to make
and
anything
then,
of yourself.
but now that young black man, now he's got to go out and work to make money, but it can't be documented money. So that's where, and it just wrecked the family.
You get married to the government.
Married to the government, right?
I brought that up because it's the same type of thing happened with this issue. It's still being pushed by our federal government, by governments all around the world. It's just another way of breaking the family down. And why do they want to do that? It's all about control.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's all about power and control.
Power.
And dividing us ultimately.
Well, because if we're always divided, then we can never overtake them. We'll never collectively come together to say, hey, we've had enough of this crap and overtake them. But at this point, that's
They've got us going in so many different directions. How do you get together?
constantly chasing your tail.
Right.
Before we close this thing out, we're gonna hold a series of podcasts to you guys because this was one issue we want to talk about. But I am really keen to talk about the social emotional learning topic and what I personally believe was an avenue that led us to where we're at now.
Well, that you bring up social emotional learning, and that's what I think a lot of these kids are starting. That's how they start thinking about their emotions because of the surveys that are coming out in the schools.
That's right.
How do you feel? Do you feel well today? Are you feeling good? Maybe you're not in the right body. And that's really how they get these kids to start thinking in this direction. Right. And then you've got the rapid onset because they're all going through puberty. Most of them, they're in their 14, 15-year-olds.
And who's putting out those surveys?
Well, that's a huge, long thing. There's an organization called CASEL, which creates all these curriculums that come into the school with the social emotional
But it's third
learning.
party. Is my point.
Yes.
But it's third party, absolutely.
But in order to get your funds and whatever, you have to, and I think
the state has determined that they have to teach these character traits.
Yeah, and this is not a knock on teachers, but what it is, unfortunately, is that if you just think about it, you're encouraging that kid to say, I need to talk about very private, intimate things.
I'm not feeling...
Not with mom and dad.
Yes. It takes the parents out of the equation.
Take that out. Yeah. Take that out, right? So, but yeah, we'll hit on that later for sure. But I think last thing, if as far as advice for those parents out there, and people in the community, get educated.
Yes. Come, and if your child, and you're the doctor, but if your child has these issues and they're talking to you, I would take them to a counselor of my choice, the physician. Come and talk to them.
That's a good point, counselor of your choice, because a lot of these counselors are being taught you just need to nod your head and affirm.
Affirm them.
This is the only diagnosis other than cosmetic surgery where the patient comes to you and tells you what the diagnosis is, and you simply nod your head and usher them into the treatment. And you're talking about a child who's actually doing this.
Right.
A child who's confused, a child who's in a tragic position, a child who's having struggles, who doesn't know their identity. They're telling you what's wrong. And how to fix it is all you're doing is using your credentials to nod this way. Now, as a counselor, we're going to walk you into somebody who's going to give you the puberty blocking hormones.
But Dr. Tanner, I know I weigh 63 pounds, but I am overweight, and I need you to let me know that.
Well, you're anorexic, and if I would give you a diet, they would take my medical license.
That's hate speech. You can't say that. I told you I am overweight, and I need you to give me some diet pills. And that's exactly what's happening, is that we don't affirm someone in their delusion.
Yep.
Except on this. And again, they're wanting to do it to kids. So for those of us, and I think that if you have a parent out there whose child, and by the way, that's one thing that's really important to note. There is Munchausen by proxy. There are those moms and dads out there who are kind of foisting that upon their kids, like Jeff Younger's wife over there. That woman is pushing that boy to do that. Yeah. But there are plenty of parents who are being completely blindsided by this.
I'd say the majority.
The majority.
Yeah.
But now, whenever that happens, what do? Because like you said, you either have an alive son or a dead daughter because, and you pointed this out, and I didn't want to miss this. These social media influencers, they basically have courses where they'll tell these kids, right?
Yeah, you need to go in and say, I'm going to commit suicide. That's what they tell them. They
Step
coach
one.
them. They coach them through this.
And
so
you
that
need to
they
tell
know
them that I've had this feeling since I was a
since
young
I was-
child.
Yeah, since I was born.
And these are paid social media influencers. That's a very important part.
Yeah.
They're not just doing this because they love doing this. They're getting paid to do
They're getting paid to do it. They're getting clicks, man.
Most of the social media influencers, if you didn't know, I saw the other day, the Kardashians get paid something like $1.5 million per tweet. I mean, it's an astronomical amount of money. So with that type of following, that type of reach, you better believe these people are getting paid large amounts of money to push these agendas.
Of course.
You know, there's the two statistics that I think every parent should keep in the back of their mind if they have a child that comes to them this way and talks to them about this. Over 80% of girls, if they are allowed to go through puberty, will come out normal on the other side.
Sure.
And over 90%, over 95% of boys will come out.
Right.
So and once you start, it's irreversible. Sure. Once you start, you're going to continue. Yeah. So why not wait?
Yeah.
Why would you?
Well, that's how this started. If you remember, or in my mind, when it all started, it was, well, let's wait until you're 18. Let's wait. If you feel that way, it's fine. Let's wait and see what happens. And then over the past 5 years, it's just morphed into, let's just get them right on in.
Get them on.
That's right.
But I understand when I listened to a podcast. It wasn't a podcast. It was actually a interview on TV with this lady and her son, who now decided to detransition after he transitioned. And what she talked about is how much anxiety and depression he had. She said she was so concerned for him with his life, she was sleeping on the floor next to his bed. And she went to another country in order to get him changed. But now you got to recognize it really is, it's their whole world is collapsing. And when a parent is really looking after the best interest of their child, they see in a problem and they're looking for an answer. Right. And the people with the microphone are telling them, this is the answer, this is the answer.
Right.
And the volume of the media and all of the push that's going out there overwhelms them. They said, I'm an idiot. I can't fight this. I've got to save my child's life.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And when you have the medical institution itself, that's an authoritative institution. So the doctors are even saying,
I don't know a parent on earth who doesn't love their child enough whenever the world is flipped upside down that wouldn't do what they need to make that child feel good. Unfortunately, for a lot of parents, that includes going this far.
Right.
Because they believe that's going to fix this grenade that's blown up in their lap.
Right.
They're going to bring their child back.
Remember, they're going to that counselor with their child. Yeah. They're going to that doctor with their child. And they're having a medical professional with a license looking at them and telling them, this is going to fix it. Mm-hmm. So they're listening to the media and they're listening to professionals. They don't have anybody who's speaking in their ears saying this is a mistake.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping with some of those lawsuits now that some of these medical professionals will start rethinking.
Well, and that's what I think that we've got to do as well, is that you get educated, but then when you get educated, what do you do with that information? You need to contact Lynn Stuckey, Tan Parker, your state rep, wherever you live, your federal, but Michael Burgess, you name it. Go down to Austin, get down and these people have got to make this. So again, an adult, whatever, but we're talking about kids. Children. Don't mess with the kids. And then also go to your school boards. Grapevine Colleyville ISD has already set the standard. That's a large school district with a lot of pull in the state. And they basically said gender is determined by biological reality.
That was it. That's
essentially what it comes down to. Because that does, you talked about freedom of speech earlier. We can't forget that it's not just protecting these kids from themselves and from the influencers out there. It's protecting their peers. Because when they tell you, my pronouns are now they, them, or whatever, and you compel that kid's speech that he now has to refer to this girl.
How many stories have we read where a teacher or other students have gotten, expelled or kicked out of school or a teacher fired for not calling a kid by their pronouns?
Bullying, harassment, SEL, it all goes back to it. So
when you get right down to it, if you're not telling them the truth, you're leading them down a path that's going to hurt them. If you're trying to protect them, you're trying to take care of them, you need to tell them the truth.
That's right.
And you need to identify the lie when it's being put out, and because there's so much damage that's being done, it's irreversible. That's a key. It's irreversible. If there's any hope for these kids to know who they are, you have to stand up and tell them the truth.
That's right.
And you have to take it seriously. So I was talking to a parent the other day, and his daughter came home and said that there was a kid in the class that was Alice and now wanted to be Alan. And I said, so how did you handle that? And he said, oh, I just told her not to worry about it. It's not a big deal. And that's why they have to take this seriously. They have to know how important this is.
Right. Speak the truth in love.
And the schools are going to have to step up.
Amen.
Yeah, I encourage all the local school boards to implement some policy on this because, like Chad said, it's going to come full circle. And the lawsuits that you think that you're protecting yourself from put upon the school districts by not having a policy, they're going to come back around the other way. They're going to be put on you.
Exactly.
So
Not having a policy is a policy.
that's it. That's exactly
right. Yeah.
And for anyone else listening, this isn't about a hate for anyone or anything. It's more about love.
It's all about love.
Absolutely.
Care
For
about
these kids.
everybody's kids because the kids are the future. So it's the complete opposite if anybody believes that there's any malice or hate in our heart.
No, we're not
It's coming
trans
from a point
folks.
of love.
Absolutely. We care about these
Just want
kids.
to protect the children.
That's it.
Yeah, because they are the future.
Yeah, well, thank y'all so much for all that you're doing. Thank you for the help that you've given me and the community. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Part one
Thank
of
you.
two to come.
That's
All
right.
right.
Or
Thanks,
more.
y'all. That's it.
Yep. God bless. Thank you.